Thanks for joining us today on the Big Data Debrief. This is a new video series where we interview the movers and shakers in the big data world. So today I'm pleased to introduce Krishna Subramanian, the COO, president, and the co-founder of Komprise. Krishna, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, glad you could be here. So maybe you could start out, tell our audience just a little bit about Komprise. Why did you and your co-founder found the company?
Yeah, myself and my two co-founders, the three of us started Comprise after our last two companies got acquired. After our second company got acquired by Citrix, we were talking to many of our customers from our prior companies about what problems they were seeing. This was about 10 years ago. And many of them said that they were starting to drown in unstructured data. What we mean by unstructured data is anything that doesn't sit in a spreadsheet or in a database. This video that we're recording right now, it's unstructured data because this video might have different information about it than a spreadsheet or a document. And unstructured data is of different formats. There's no common format to it. And that's why, it doesn't have a common structure. And what's happened to businesses is that, 10, 15 years ago, most of their data was in databases. It was for SAP or Oracle or PeopleSoft and all your HR and CRM applications. But this unstructured data was just user documents back then. But over time, more and more applications have been generating unstructured data. So every time you go to your doctor's office, they take an X-ray that's unstructured. If you sit in a self-driving car, all the data it generates is unstructured. So this unstructured data has been growing in double digits every year, so much so that now 90% of the data in an enterprise is unstructured. And so that's why we created Comprise, because this unstructured data can be really unwieldy and difficult to manage. It's very hard to know how much of it is there. It's hard to know what it's costing a business. And more importantly, things like ransomware attack unstructured data first because it's the weakest link. And then AI needs unstructured data. So unstructured data is sort of at the heart of a business right now, and managing it is a very difficult problem. That's the problem we solve.
So when you founded, you and your two co-founders founded Comprise, was there a specific event that you detected that you highlighted and said, "Hey, we need to do something about this"?
Yeah, unstructured data was growing a lot, and the cloud had just started gaining prominence. I think about 10 years ago, Amazon S3 was a few years old, and people were starting to use it a lot. And a lot of the businesses were starting to say, well, what data can we send to the cloud? How can we leverage something like Amazon S3, but make it so that our users don't have to change their behavior, our applications don't have to change, because the cloud, as you know, Alex, most of the solutions like Amazon S3 or Azure Blob, they use something called object storage. And most enterprise data, inside a company that's unstructured, sits on file storage. So the key event we were looking at is, how do you reconcile file and object storage? How do you know what data to send to the cloud? How do you make it transparent? So even if you keep something in object storage, it still looks like a file. Comprise has this thing called transparent move technology to do that. So the cloud was the key event, and enabling data management in the hybrid cloud was the key use case that Comprise started with.
And we've been managing unstructured data, ever since I guess photo albums, right? I mean, we have techniques to deal with it. So why we should be good at it by now, I would think. Why is it turning out to be so difficult?
Let me ask you this, Alex. Maybe you're a very organized person. I actually don't know much about you, but I'd venture a guess if you're like me. Uh, you know, how many photos do you think are there on your phone right now? And how many of them have you looked at in the last 3 days?
or on my computer. I try
Yeah,
to
or on
organize
your
stuff by
computer,
year
right?
because there's no other good way for me to do it, right? Like pictures and stuff. But
Yeah, and
yeah.
that's what happens, right? We all are data hoarders at the end of the day, not because we're trying to do something bad, but everything we use is generating data, and the data is sitting somewhere. And it's important when we create it, we're using it a lot. But then, it's not that it becomes any less important, but it's not active, right? Like on your phone, you have a lot of photos probably and videos that you want to keep because maybe one day you'll go visit your grandparents and you want to show it to them, um, uh, but you're not looking at it every day. And multiply that by 15,000 employees, and several hundred applications in a business, and you can see how unwieldy this problem becomes for an enterprise. So they have unstructured data everywhere. 80% of that data is not being actively used. It's been not been touched in months, but IT doesn't know that. So all the data is sitting on pretty expensive storage. All the data is getting two or three backup copies. Then with ransomware, there's another copy for ransomware protection and for DR. So before you know it, you have like 4 to 5 copies of all this data, and you're talking petabytes of data. And so that's why it's a problem for businesses, because 30% of IT budget now is going towards storage, and most of that is going towards unstructured data. About 65% of it is going to unstructured data. And so the issue is, how can IT understand how much unstructured data is in an organization across all their storage? How can they figure out what data is not being used and is cold, and they can manage it more efficiently at a fraction of the cost by using the cloud? How can they reduce the cost of ransomware, and how can they shrink the ransomware attack surface? And how can they tag all this data and get it ready for AI, so that, when AI needs unstructured data, they're not feeding sensitive data to it, or they're not creating data leakage by accident. It's all classified. Those are the problems that we solve.
And what is the data, the unstructured data that companies are storing? I mean, is it just as simple as images and video files, or is it something else that's counting up into the petabytes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, some of that depends by industry, because, like medical, there's a lot of, medical imaging. Research tends to be more application generated data, like genomics data, or, seismic data, generated by oil and gas, applications. So I would say unstructured data, the formats vary. It can be PDFs, it can be images, it can be video, it can be application specific files. Like in genomics, there's something called BAM files. So, it by vertical, there's vertical specific files. And that's what's difficult about unstructured data. It's not any one format, it's all of these formats.
So I guess in one of those scientific applications, it would be the application itself that you would rely on to manage the data in those specific formats, right? Does that not work?
Well, I think the word manage is a confusing word, because, what does manage mean? The application is definitely writing to the file, to the file. It's generating the data, and it's probably using the data. So yeah, you could say that's a part of management. When
Mhm.
we are talking about management, we mean once the artifact is produced, once the application has created the file and it's trying to store it somewhere, now do we store it here, or do we store it somewhere else and make it look like it's still local? Do we, tag it so that not just that application, but an AI application that doesn't know that particular genomics process can still know, which genome that research was about? So that's the kind of management we're talking about. We're talking about management outside the application, at kind of the infrastructure layer. So once the artifact is produced, post production, those assets have to be managed, and that's where we come in. Does that make sense?
So yeah, I think so. How did companies do that before they had tools like Komprise? Did they just throw the data away once they used it in the application, or?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. It's interesting. Some of our customers have told us that in the history of their company, and I mean, some of these, one of them is one of the largest Ivy League universities in America. Another is a bank, and they said that in the history of their company, they've never deleted data. So what were people doing before something like Comprise? I mean, they were just storing all this data. Sometimes, the storage system itself tries to do some data management for you, but it's limited to all the platforms that storage vendor supports. And when the storage system does the data management, it's you have lock-in. If you leave that storage environment and go somewhere else, all the efficiency that you created goes away. You have to rehydrate everything because
Mm.
the storage management is proprietary. So before Comprise, they were just manually doing this, or they were not even doing anything. And 10 years ago, that wasn't even a problem because the unstructured data volumes were not big. 3 terabytes of unstructured data was kind of a big number. Today, most organizations have 5 petabytes or more of unstructured data in
Mhm.
data intensive verticals. Many have 50 petabytes, and the big ones are 100 petabytes plus. So the scale of the problem has made it unmanageable.
Right, and we're rapidly approaching the exabyte era, right? Where
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah,
really big
thousands
companies
of
have
terabytes.
well
Yeah,
over an exabyte.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And you think about AI, right? AI has already, the large models have already been trained on all publicly available data. So if you as a business are trying to use AI for your competitive advantage, the only way that you're going to gain that advantage is by tying AI to your corporate data. And 90% of your corporate data is unstructured. So that means you need to find a good way to tie AI to your unstructured data. So again, unstructured data management is very important for AI because AI is not going to help you much without that data.
And did you and your co-founders know that this data would eventually be used to train a lot of AI models back when you founded the company, or was it mostly just avoiding that risk and that pain? Did you know that there was the big gain down the road too?
Yeah, we did. I would be lying if we said we knew AI would become the big use case. We didn't know that, but we did create Comprise. I mean, even if you look at our mission statement from years ago, we said we want to help companies, rein in the cost and risk of unstructured data, and we want to help them maximize the value of unstructured data. I think how the value would be created, we were probably thinking it would be more around big data analytics, which is still a valid use case, like feeding data to a data lake or a data
Mhm.
warehouse, unstructured data, feeding that into a data warehouse. That is also useful. But AI is just such a bigger opportunity, and it's just a perfect fit for unstructured data.
Okay. And companies are feeding all kinds of structured data into object stores, right? With data lakes and lake houses. Is that falling, under Comprises management too, or is that still managed, I guess, in like a database?
Yeah. So, I think it's a good question because, people think, oh, data warehouse is structured. Data warehouse is about databases, but data lakes is unstructured. And that's actually not true. The data lakes so far, all the companies that do data lakes, they have worked on tabular data. So tabular data means it's not in a database, but it's in like an Excel spreadsheet or a Parquet file, which is like an Excel spreadsheet. So
Mm.
it still has structure. It's not really unstructured data. So can Comprise manage tabular data? Yeah, we can manage it, but we are even better at the really unstructured data, like documents, audio, video, genomics data, seismic data, research data, all of that, which doesn't even have a tabular structure.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good point. Although there are a lot of Parquet and iceberg files floating around, right? But I guess
Oh
there's
yeah,
other solutions for.
we can
Yeah.
manage the life cycle of those files. Yes, Alex, we can do all of that.
Mhm.
But looking inside the files, tagging the sensitive data in them, or enriching metadata, those kinds of things. We focus more on unstructured data for those things.
So what is the secret sauce in Comprise? How do you do what you do? Are you opening each of the billion or trillion files and you know uh, looking inside these to categorize them? How does it work?
Great question. So the first thing we do is, when you point Comprise at all your cloud and your data centers, Comprise finds all the storage in those environments, and then Comprise quickly indexes all that data and starts giving analytics. And when we do the index, the first thing we're doing is not opening files. We're looking at the metadata of the files. And the reason we're doing that is because it's super fast. Also, we don't have to crack open every file to do this. And we're bringing structure to this unstructured data. So we can do things like say, hey, in total, you have 15 billion files. It's 4 petabytes. 30% of it is video and 20% is documents. 75% of this hasn't been used by anyone in 3 months or more. 10% of it belongs to ex-employees. This is how much it's costing you. That kind of aggregate analytics we can give by using the metadata. So that's the first thing Comprise does. But as we do this, we are building a global meta database. So we're building a structure, we're kind of imputing a structure from unstructured data. And using these analytics, most of our customers, they start optimizing the cost of their unstructured data. So they start doing things like transparent tiering of data, from an expensive location to a cheaper location, so they can save costs. And they start moving data, tiering data to the cloud to reduce ransomware attack surface. So there's all those infrastructure use cases. But then, because we have things in a metadata base, we can then go and also inspect contents or create data pipelines for somebody else to inspect the content, and we enrich the metadata. So, for example, you can use AI to look at all the image files and to tag, how many of these images have Alex in it with a beard. Maybe, sometimes you have a beard and sometimes you don't, and you want to know which images, you had a beard in. So we could use an AI process to find that and add that tag. So we can enrich the metadata either by ourselves looking at the data or by using any other, preprocessor. And we can build these smart data workflows that involve pipelines to AI, because that's the other thing with AI. AI is not linear. One AI process might actually feed another AI process, and so you need to be able to build these iterative workflows
Mhm.
across AI.
So it sounds like Comprise is being used in these data labeling pipelines. Is that right? It,
Yes, data labeling and data mobility, because moving a petabyte of data, if you were to do it yourself, it's going to take you a few months of work, because it's
yeah.
billions of files. And so imagine, right, you don't want to be moving petabytes of data around manually. So Comprise actually is an elastic parallel architecture. We move data 25 times faster than anyone else. Uh, and also, we only move just the data you need. So we are efficient about it. So you don't have to move a whole petabyte to have AI look at 10,000 files. We'll just find those 10,000 files, curate it, only move those 10,000, get the answers, enrich the metadata base. So Comprise has all that efficiency for data pipelines. So yes, we classify data and we also mobilize data for data pipelines, and we
Nope.
automate data governance around it.
And I imagine you're working a lot in the cloud and S3 and other object stores. Are you touching some of these large file systems out there too, such as used in academia?
Yeah, so we work with anything that works across, standard protocols like NFS, SMB sieves, object. And so most of these platforms, they support one of these protocols. So a lot of research environments use NFS, for example. A lot
Hmm.
of Windows environments use SMB.
Okay. So it sounds like you're creating basically structure and a database around the unstructured data, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yes.
I mean, that's the way that we're, I guess, used to managing data. So maybe it's just a force of habit that that's the way we want to do it. Is there another way to do it?
Um, building structure on unstructured data is very important for the reason you mentioned, because it gives you a way to label and hold on to the data and to parse it, and to also have unstructured data interoperate with structured data. Because if you want to do things where you say, I want to find, my top customers by revenue, and then in the invoices, I want to search for something. So that's a use case where you have to bridge structured and unstructured data. So building structure to unstructured data helps you, make unstructured data not an island, but make it part of the bigger enterprise. So I think that's the one of the best ways to do it. Is it the only way? No, it's not the only way. You could just process unstructured data by itself. And there are people that only process documents. They would take a document, they could break it into pieces and do something with it, etc. So they're very specialized. But to be broadly applicable, I think you need a metadata base.
Okay. And what impact is AI having on Comprise's business? Is this like you mentioned, you didn't really create the company and the product with AI in mind. It's kind of come along since then. So what what sort of impact is it having?
Yeah, it's early in the market because people are still just starting to prepare data for AI. But I can tell you that it most we did a survey with our own customers to try to understand this, Alex, and 75% of our customers are embarking on preparing data for AI. So we just released actually an enhancement to our product to do something called sensitive data detection. Because when you're preparing your data for AI, one of the important things is to know what data has PII in it, or what data has maybe sensitive IP, like project information that you don't want to send to an AI process. And you want to tag all that and classify it so that when you're feeding AI, you want to make sure the wrong data doesn't get fed. So almost all our customers are starting to use that now. That's why we added sensitive data detection into our product. So what impact does it have on our business? I think it's starting to have a broad impact. I think the full extent of it, it's too early because the market is still emerging.
Yeah, in the 2024 State of Unstructured Data Management Report, I think it came out last October, you found 13% of your survey respondents said they restrict corporate data they can use in AI, while 31% have no restrictions. Is that surprising to you, or is that what you expected?
Well, it's a little bit shocking that 31% are not restricting, right? But it's very understandable because AI is so new, and there are no, I mean, a lot of companies are still experimenting with it. And so they don't really have well-defined, corporate governance for it. And they don't have automation. I think part of the problem is if you just let people use whatever AI they want and you just even give them guidelines, that's not, I don't think, all that enforceable in a company, because somebody may not read the guideline properly, or they may think, yeah, this is not sensitive, and they send that data, and then you have a data leak, and then you find out, right? So really, I think the right way to do this is you prepare your data for data governance, and you have automation to feed data in a data AI pipeline, so that that automation can track for you what data did get fed. And it can create an audit trail, so you can actually see if you've been compliant or not. You can flag where there are issues. So, so is it surprising? No, it's not really surprising, but it shows where the opportunity is. It shows that all those people that don't yet have a process will soon need to have one, because there's very massive legal and financial implications of not having data governance for AI.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of sensitive data out there, right, that you don't necessarily want people accessing freely.
You've seen this, right? I think I mean, these are public articles, but I think Samsung, said its employees could use AI, and then they found out that some of their company IP had kind of leaked into AI because some engineer was just asking AI to verify if the code was correct or not. Didn't realize that meant their proprietary code now went into an LLM. So there's all of this, and so data governance is extremely critical, and that's why you don't want users just sending data to AI. You want a
Mhm.
systematic workflow to do that.
So is Comprise providing that data governance piece as well as the data management
Yes.
piece? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we have something called smart data workflows. So an IT organization can actually set up, they can classify data and say this sensitive data should be excluded from an AI pipeline. They can set up who sees what, and they can say, and users can go and say, I want to feed this data for this use case to this AI process. And then when that data is actually being fed, Comprise will audit, it'll keep an audit trail of what got fed. So we keep full accountability of everything. So you can, and so you can use it for data governance.
Okay. So data governance, access control, as well as the management life cycling data into the cloud for deletion, kind of all of the above.
Yes, yes,
Is
yes.
That's a lot. I mean, how do you see the company and its products evolving here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's I think definitely we're investing a lot more in capabilities around AI data pipelines. I think there's a tremendous opportunity there, and we're in a very good position to continue to round out our solutions there. So definitely AI and data workflows and data pipelines for AI is a big area of investment. And we continue to also enhance our platform for the hybrid cloud. Almost all our customers are in the hybrid cloud, so they use a mix of data center and cloud, and I think that's going to continue because of security and privacy reasons. So we'll continue to invest in making that simpler and simpler for customers.
Are you seeing a pullback from the cloud at all? Are people starting to, install some of these large data storage clusters on prem, like from the folks at Hammerspace or MinIO or one of these other companies?
Yeah, it's I think there's a lot of conversation. Did people go to the cloud, or people repatriating from the cloud? And I'll tell you that I that's not what we see so as much of. What we do see is people using the cloud for some use cases and on premise for some use cases. And with AI in particular, I think there's a lot of talk right now about model building, and everybody's focused on, hey, do you need GPUs, do you need GPU enabled storage because you need all this capacity and performance. But really only 5% of the market is around model building. 95% of organizations will not build any LLMs. They will just use LLMs for inferencing. And even model building, you saw with guys like DeepSeek, the cost of model building will keep coming down. So, the short answer to your question, Alex, it's not that we see repatriation from the cloud. What we see is things like inferencing. You don't need that much compute, you don't need that much processing, and inferencing relies on a lot of data that may be in the data center and you may not want to send to the cloud. So inferencing could be a very good use case for on-premise execution. Model training might be a better use case in the cloud. So we're just seeing the hybrid cloud being leveraged for different use cases. So it's not that the same data is necessarily getting repatriated. So I think what's important is your data can flow freely
Mhm.
across the hybrid cloud depending on the use case, but with proper security and control.
Are you seeing any indication that people are storing less data, maybe reforming their data hoarding ways at all?
Uh, I think people are definitely storing data more intelligently. That's something we help customers a lot with. And they are, they do have some data deletion happening. I don't know that they're storing less data. I think they're storing data more efficiently, is what I would say.
Okay, great. And what kind of opportunity do you see to use AI in your own products to help comprise, make data management more efficient?
So, definitely there's, when you think about AI, I know like we think about AI as one big thing, but I personally think of AI as two things. There's predictive AI, which is more machine learning. And by predictive, what I mean is every time you ask it a question, it'll give you the same answer because it's based on an algorithm. And then there's generative AI, where it's more ambiguous what answer you'll get. You don't know because it's doing its own interpretation. Komprise has predictive, automation already in our product, and we'll continue to do that. Things for use cases for generative AI. We are exploring some, like making our documentation easier to access, for example, and things like that. So we will look at adding generative AI, but you have to be careful where you add generative AI because it's not predictable. So
Yeah,
predictive, I guess.
that's what makes it exciting, right? You never know what it's going to say. So,
Yeah, that's not always a good thing in data management. So
yeah, no kidding, huh? Well, it's yeah. Is data? Do you think data management is it going to get easier as we go forward?
it has to become more scalable, more efficient at scale. Yes, it should become easier. That's our goal. We want to make it really easy, but we also want to make it really efficient because the data volumes are getting to be so big that efficiency is really important.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on the Big Data Debrief today, Krishna. It was great to chat with you and talk about your company, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me on.